hello, and welcome back to another episode of SV and Roxy, where we have conversations for the everyday woman by two everyday women. Today, we want to talk about voting, specifically in connection to women and women's freedom. So, my friend, it really appears that there is a concerted effort by some in America to roll back women's freedoms and our ability to equally participate in society, basically. You have that effort, and then you have people who seem to have some kind of convenient or selective amnesia about what the previous administration was like, what it was like there. So let's talk about the piece with specifically with women, what we see happening, what areas of our freedoms that are being targeted, and then let's talk about some whys, some goals, how we move forward. What are your thoughts?
Hmm. Yeah, it's really a heavy topic, and it's surprising to me over the past, I'm going to say 24 months, all of the media attention to women with
Mhm.
respect to what's happening in legislation, with our reproductive rights, with, obviously they haven't touched the voting rights yet, but that could be next. But just with respect to how women um, are unable to even make proper choices with respect to their body and
Yes,
to their health care, which really
yes.
is a priority. With their health care, that not only affects them, but it affects their children. It affects their role as, as a mother, as a wife,
Mhm.
as a child, as a daughter, and being able to be a productive member of the workforce. When you're making choices about how you plan your life out, you know,
Yes.
majority of women now, compared to, 15, 20 years ago, attend college, attend
Mhm.
postgraduate,
Yes.
are in professions that they have to get proper educations to fulfill those roles. And to fulfill those roles, sometimes it even takes time that they have to commit to getting kind of integrated into the corporate culture, into corporate society, and
Mhm.
excelling in their careers. And as they're doing that, they may make choices in terms of when they want to start a family, when they want to get married, and that may be delayed, as they are entering the workforce. And unfortunately, the roles they're not always fair. Even though we have wonderful partners and spouses that tend to be, co-partners when it comes to child rearing, it is still the woman's responsibility to, to bear the child, right? Go through the pregnancy and to tend to love your child, after you have the birth. And not to say that your partner is not there to support you, but you still have to, go through the birthing process, whether it's having a natural birth, whether you are adopting, whether you're even going through artificial means to have that child. But there is still a commitment that a woman has to make to her body, and it could be, time away from the job market um, when making those decisions. So I see all that to say that women are faced with a lot of responsibilities and very difficult choices. And it makes it even more difficult to make those decisions if you don't have the proper resources or rights, or if you're making decisions that are going to make you criminally liable for making those decisions, put you in jail, right? And
Yes.
so we are in a very difficult situation right now with respect to women's roles in society and legally how it is complicating our efforts to move ahead.
Mhm.
So, looking right now ahead to, 2024, we have 6 months and we're away from another presidential election. And I'm surprised that there's so much emphasis on women and removing their power, because I do think that women are quietly making decisions right now in terms of how they're going to position their vote in this election. I think because of what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're reading, and
Right.
even what the media is reporting, it makes it very challenging, I think, for women to put their trust into one, let's say, political party versus another,
Mhm.
um, when you feel that, you're being attacked.
Right,
Hmm.
right. It just really seems like I heard somebody say this week, and it just resonated with me so much. She said that it would appear the movement is to have women make women to be non-consensual reproductive labor
Hmm.
in this country. Non-consensual reproductive labor, like that's all you're supposed to be doing, that's all
Hmm.
you're good for. And we also heard this past a week and a half, I think it's been about now, the football player Harrison, is it Butkins or Butkerts, his commencement speech
Hmm.
at one of the colleges, and how he was saying that, basically women have been blatantly lied to. I'm paraphrasing here because he used a different term. That going to college is important, that having a career is important, and his message is directly on point
Hmm.
with everything that we've heard about Project 2025, and we can get into that in another episode,
Hmm.
and one political party's ideology and how they want to move forward. So we have, with the attack on abortion, the reversal of Roe. We have, we've seen the issues and concerns and attacks on IVF,
Hmm.
uh, contraceptives. We've heard
Hmm.
that that's the next thing coming up, and
Hmm.
even divorce,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
more women, I think it's about 70% of women
Hmm.
file for divorce first. And
Hmm.
then also, directly looking at that, the divorce that is, those divorces that are about, non-specific or irreconcilable differences, and things that are not loosely defined as to why you are trying to achieve this divorce.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's what I've heard is, down the road.
Hmm.
So all these things just really appear um, to pulling women as a group back,
Yeah.
backwards, backwards, in regards to our freedoms, our rights, and I believe there's a specific target in regards to the education that women are achieving, and
Hmm.
also our positioning in the workplace.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
So interesting that you mentioned that our position in the workplace. It makes me think back, and working in corporate America, and I'm going to say it's been at least the last 20 years that
Mhm.
corporations have initiated these programs called Women in Leadership.
Mhm.
And it was a response to me to diversity.
Yes.
And a lot of companies maybe shied away from diversity, but really promoted the women in leadership program. So getting women promoted, getting them mentors and sponsors, and that continues. And on the aside from that, we have the diversity, equity, inclusion. So really, which represents everyone. But I do think there was a particular and is a particular emphasis on women in leadership, which continues today. So, if
Okay.
you think about all the years that corporate America has been sponsoring these women initiatives, it
Mhm.
sometimes I think can make others, non-females, feel that they're being excluded, that they're being overlooked. So
Mhm.
whether, because there are no more diversity quotas in place for hiring and promoting, minorities, the women in leadership were not part of that quota, but yet still remained an emphasis and a major initiative in corporations. And you speak about the job force, that has shown remarkable numbers as well. And I want to refer to an article that I read recently looking at women in leadership. And it really talked about looking at the percentages of women in the workforce. And this article actually is from CNN, but it looked at the percentages of women in the labor market. And according to the authors and researchers of the article, they talked about the labor force participation rate for women in their prime working age. It hit an all-time high in June of 2023, reaching 77.8%. And that
Wow.
was according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So, I mean, that's a large percentage of women, right?
Yes.
And that was
Hmm.
a continuous climb, Shauna, from 2001, where the high went as high as 80.9%. So,
Mm.
if you look at some of the recruiting firms like ZipRecruiter, their numbers show that women reached a high of 75.3%.
Hmm.
So these are numbers that are growing, right? In spite of the pandemic. So we saw during the pandemic that the numbers of women in the workforce dropped off
Right.
and they were slower to come back to work and
Hmm.
regain their positions. But
Hmm.
now they are, and you're seeing those increases again rapidly rise. So when given that the employment levels, I'm sorry, for women below pandemic were a little bit lower for women than for men, it
Hmm.
looks like, according to the future job reports, that these continuous growth numbers and strong growth numbers are continuing to grow. So, that alone, when you look at the workforce you talked about,
Hmm.
you can see why there may be groupings of individuals that it may be threatening to see
Yes.
the percentage of women, and they could be, afraid that they're being kind of moved out of the market if women are coming in, not only getting jobs, but they're promoting. We see more women executives. We see more women entrepreneurs. We see more women, senior level CEOs than ever before.
Hmm.
So, when you look overall at the labor market, the women's participation has rebounded from, they call it the pandemic precession,
Hmm.
and returned it to its pre-pandemic form of making
Hmm.
progressively historic labor market gains. And it's really impressive.
Yeah.
So, females dominate across industries, Shauna. It's from healthcare, and caregiving.
Yes.
Those were the fastest growing industries. And in addition to that, the educational attainment, as you mentioned, for women rose substantially,
Hmm.
and they also made greater inroads in traditionally male dominated fields like
Right.
construction, even
Hmm.
agriculture, and repair and maintenance. So, looking at those numbers alone, you can see why, unfortunately, maybe fear,
Yes.
um, maybe fear of what's going to happen if we don't put a halt to this, if we don't slow this progress down. Is
Right.
it gonna move and price, perhaps male employees out of the marketplace and out of the CEO suite?
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts, which is
Right.
causing this aggressive and incessant attack on women.
Right.
Hmm.
And even though knowing the history of how long it took women to get to this point, like this change didn't even start to come about until the 70s.
Yeah,
And then you have to
yeah,
think about how long has America been in existence?
yeah.
And who's been dominating in all areas for hundreds
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
years, right?
Hmm.
But you are finding this discomfort to the level of, like you said, the fear and anxiety of,
Hmm.
oh, we might be completely pushed out, which
Yeah,
I don't foresee that happening. But this is the fear and anxiety that we're hearing and experiencing in
yeah,
our own industries, right?
yeah,
The conversations around us. If you're not watching media, news, etc., you might be feeling this in the workplace. You might be hearing those conversations. You might be treated in a certain way by certain people because they feel intimidated
yeah,
that you're rising, you're getting too far ahead of yourself.
yeah, yeah,
We're moving out of our quote unquote place, the
yeah,
women's
yeah,
place. And outside of corporations, we have states that are going as far as, if women going back to the contraceptives and birth control and abortion, they're locking women up.
mhm,
Louisiana
mhm,
just passed a law where
mhm.
women can get up to 5 years
Yeah,
in jail if they're caught in possession of, just a simple like a Plan B pill
Mhm.
without a prescription.
Mhm.
My home state of Texas, there's a bounty. You
Mhm.
can literally turn women in. Your neighbor,
Yeah.
you know your neighbor's daughter, because there are no exceptions for rape or incest in the state of
Mhm. Mhm.
Texas, my
Mhm.
home state. So you know this situation occurred with your neighbor's daughter. You find out that she's pursuing an abortion. You can turn her in and get paid $10,000. Like
Yeah.
there's a bounty.
Yeah.
So what do we do as women? How do we push back? How do we organize? How do we get prepared and ready? Because we really have to advocate for ourselves in this upcoming election.
Yeah. And you're right. And to provide fair balance, I think it's not just the women, what can we do, but it's women and
Yes,
men. What can
exactly.
we do to make sure
Exactly.
that
Great point.
yeah, that we're not making drastic changes, that we're not sitting back and allowing drastic legislation to happen,
Mhm.
especially with respect to healthcare and how it can be fatal for women. Um,
Yes.
and very difficult. I saw an article recently that, someone is advocating maybe looking at birth control, right? So if you can't make decisions about when you want to conceive, that affects males and females, right? And so,
Mhm.
um, I've had very supportive males in my life, in my career, who
Yes.
supported me when I decided to have children, who supported me in allowing me to be have a more flexible schedule,
Mhm.
because I was a working mom. So obviously, we're not saying everyone falls into this crazy category of what we're seeing right now, but
Right.
I think it takes everyone to take a step forward and be courageous and
Mhm.
stepping forward and speaking the truth, and not being afraid, as you said, to be advocates and get involved. You
Mhm.
talk about legislation as well as the new upcoming election that we have in
Mhm.
6 months. I think overall, women are going to play a pivotal role in deciding who will be the what 47th president of the United
Right.
States.
Right.
And, it's surprising to me that individuals aren't thinking about the power um, of the female vote.
Mhm.
Um, from age, 18 up, the power collectively, well, what
Mhm.
can happen from state to state.
Yes.
And I think people are going to be very surprised because the polls aren't picking this up. And
Mhm.
I think that women have had enough, as well as some of the men. And I think they're sitting back and just waiting because I
Mhm.
think we've talked enough. We've seen enough. But so
Great
many of
point.
us have experienced having challenges in our life um, with respect to healthcare, with
Mhm.
respect to having children, with respect to losing children, miscarrying, having to make
Yes.
very drastic decisions about your health when
Mhm.
it becomes situations where you have to make a life or death decision, but it affects the partners as well. Another article that I read really spoke to looking at women's political leadership. So I'm very surprised that, as I said again, that women comprise the largest group of registered voters,
Mhm.
right? And they tend to turn out in a very high um, level to vote. In
Mhm.
fact, the last election, 68.4% of voters were women, right? And that was in the 2020 election. So when you think about what's happening now, those numbers could quadruple because I don't think women are in a position now to do the watchful waiting, waiting to see what's going to happen. Because I think we realize it's now or never. The situations that are occurring, if you know, women of all ethnicities um, don't get out and choose to be advocates and
Yes.
read and be informed about legislation. that, may not just be in their local state,
Mhm.
but become national legislation that
Mhm.
will, in fact, impact us currently and
Mhm.
impact our daughters and
Yes.
their daughters. So
Yes.
that's the concern,
Mhm.
and I think that before you read about the last election, it's always reported that it was the African American women that
Mhm.
got out and turned the vote,
Mhm.
one particular way.
Mhm.
But what's happening now with the aggressive approaches to altering women's power and
Right.
rights, it's all women, it's all
Mhm.
ethnicities, and it's all
Mhm.
age groups.
Mhm.
Um, Even women who are past childbearing age know the importance and impact if your
Right.
rights are taken away because they were here before the Dobbs decision, right?
Mhm.
A lot of them were alive before Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
So, all of those different demographics and age groups, when they come together, can be a very powerful force. And even though, again, may not be very verbal, we may not be polling, but I
Mhm.
think the results are going to be quite surprising to many.
Okay, you said so many great things, great
Hmm.
nuggets in all of that.
Hmm.
So I do want to say this: we we must be the group because at this point, unless there is a course correction
Hmm.
that we see here within the next 5.5, 6 months, um, we are the group. We're gonna
Yeah,
have to be the group
yeah.
because um, unfortunately, there has been a loss in with so much of the electorate that's connected with what's happening in the Middle East. Let's
Hmm.
just be honest about that. Um, 40% of the electorate, because I started tracking, Gen Z from the 2020 election. So at that time, it was estimated 17 million of those young people will become eligible to vote
Hmm.
in 2024.
Right.
Um, so that's about 40% of the electorate. Then you have Muslim people, you have
Hmm.
Arab people, you
Hmm.
have Palestinian people.
Hmm.
Um, and we've had our conversations about this,
Hmm.
and we are in support of, and we feel the same way. However, I'll just speak for me. I don't see personally how throwing this country to the wind will help any other country. I just don't see how, if we allowed the previous administration to come back in, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, he's not really keen on helping the Black and Brown people that are here. Why would he be concerned about brown people that are in Gaza, that are in Palestine? You know what I'm saying? To not get too deep into that conversation. So it really will fall back on women, is what I'm trying to say. It really is going to be, up to us to make sure that not only we as women get out, but also we're communicating with our family members, like you said,
Hmm.
the men in our lives,
Hmm.
our sons, our
Hmm.
people that we work with, the people in our community.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have to not only educate them, but also combat, a lot of the miseducation that's thrown out there, that people just, if they don't do their own due diligence and their own research, they'll just latch onto and go with,
Yeah.
when that's not correct information. So I see that as one of the ways that we as women can forge forward over this next 5.5, 6 months, and really work in our communities to make sure that people have the correct information. I just take one simple from this week, the whole conversation about, oh, Biden and it sent the DOJ after, 45 when they raided Mar-a-Lago, and with people that were armed. That's standard narrative, that's standard verbiage that is in the charging documents.
Hmm.
So But you see how that's latched on and it's
Sure.
become a full conversation when it's not the truth. And it
Mhm,
was the same for when they went to Biden
mhm,
for documents as
mhm,
well. So I
mhm.
think that education piece is going to be key,
Sure.
whether it's just within our families, our communities,
Mhm,
workplace, church,
mhm,
wherever it is.
mhm,
I believe that's one area where we can really take charge in regards to, pushing for and advocating for protecting our freedoms,
mhm,
not only just as women, but just as a whole, as a
mhm,
collective.
mhm. Yeah, I think you're right. The education piece is critical, and I think that's part of that empowerment. I think that women have,
Mhm.
and and being the voice of reason, right? Being the voice of providing factual and truth. And for anyone out there, if you're hearing or seeing things and reports or media, you're not sure, do some research yourself,
Yeah.
right? So you're getting information from various sources, right? So you
Mhm.
can compare the information and then come to a conclusion yourself based upon what you read and research and what's accurate. um, so I think, I always think, as a parent, as a parent who has a daughter, you
Mhm.
know, I look at how I vote and how it's going to affect her. And,
Yes.
and I would say, across the US, every family, every parent wants our sons and daughters to be as valuable members as they can be to society. And we
Mhm.
do that by preparing them to be successful and contributing members,
Mhm.
whether they choose, a position where they're going to be independent contributors, where they're going to be private business owners, whether they're
Right.
creatives, whether they enter college or professional school. We want them to be valuable contributing members to society. That's what makes the US so great, right? That we allow everyone to be able to have that opportunity and make those choices. But as
Mhm.
parents, we want our kids to be successful. Again, I said sons and daughters. And especially with our daughters, we're all putting our daughters, through college or preparing them, right, to be
Right.
prepared for life.
Mhm.
Um, and we do that by knowing that, once they enter adulthood and their careers, whatever that may be, and some may choose to delay that and start their kids early, have a family, and that's
Mhm.
beautiful as well.
Mhm.
But we do want them to be as well prepared and well educated.
Yes.
And for those that do enter that track of that workforce, our daughters um, are going to have to make those choices that we talked about earlier about, am I going to have kids now? Am I going to wait 3 to 5 years to get situated in my career? And with that's going to come those questions and challenges. And unfortunately, those that wait a little longer to have kids, then you're confronted with more difficulties, and more higher risk pregnancies where things can happen. So
Mhm.
I say that because the choices we make now, parents, fathers, and moms, those choices we make in the ballot booth are going
Mhm.
to affect those daughters and
Yes.
sons that we're raising. And I
Right.
just want everyone to keep that in mind when you're making
Yeah.
decisions and you're
Yeah.
hearing things. How is it going to affect my 20-year-old daughter three
Mhm.
to 5 years from now? And how is it going to affect my son,
Mhm.
as a parent 3 to 5 years from now? Right,
Mhm.
as my son and his wife or partner, whatever it may be, or it could be partners choose to adopt children, how is it going to affect them? So,
Mhm.
um, so the education piece is critical, right?
Yeah.
Because that may
Affect
look
them.
different for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Their ability to maintain their freedoms
Hmm.
and make decisions for their lives in the
Hmm.
time that they want to
Yeah.
make decisions, to have family, career, whatever it is. So that education piece is huge.
Hmm.
So the directive, because you talked about going to the ballot box and making sure that we are very intentional
Hmm.
about how we cast our vote. Um, what should the focus be? Where can these changes be implemented Because people always look at, just the president, right?
Mhm,
But there's a whole lot of people that make a whole lot of decisions before you even get to that highest level.
mhm, mhm,
So I believe it's very critical that we do whatever is in our power to take back the House, because the president's hands are going to be tied to a certain extent if we don't maintain the White House, but we also have to have the House, right? So we've got to talk about, and you touched on this too, not just in your own state's elections, but if you know there's because every seat is up in the House. For the audience that doesn't know this, every seat is up in the House. So for those people that you have been seeing over and over voting against things that really speak to, your needs and what you want to see in the country, really pay attention to that. So not only in regards to just casting your vote, but also being mindful of the changes on the levels that we need to see those changes. And then if there's in another state, and I'll go back to my home state of Texas, Colin Allred is running for, Ted Cruz's seat. I'm not limited. I live in California, but I can always donate to Colin Allred, right?
mhm.
I
Yeah.
can always try to help promote campaigns in other states that I know are going to help us as a collective
Mhm, mhm,
get the house get the house back, so we can have all three areas, so that the decisions that we want to see happen, people complain a lot, well, I didn't see this happen, and Biden and Harris, they promised this and we didn't see this happen. Well, their hands are tied to a certain extent, and we got to look down the ballot for those people that can help make the things see that make the things happen that we want to see come into fruition, right? So I think that should be a target for people to really look at. Okay, what house seats are up for my area, but then also, who do I see repeatedly on the news and in media that's causing wreaking havoc and causing everything to be backed up to where these changes aren't being made in my community as well, even though they represent Georgia, even though they represent Texas, even though they represent Mississippi, Alabama.
mhm,
They're the holdup,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Um, so maybe you can speak to that as well. Like, what areas do you think should be targets for people to kind of really focus and hone in on in this upcoming election?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think if we can have a bipartisan approach and getting and affecting change, whether it's the House or Senate, I mean that is I think the ideal goal. But your initial
Mhm,
question is what can people do, right? What should they do? I'm a believer
mhm,
in civic engagement. And
mhm.
I believe in grassroots. So I don't think we,
Yes,
have to only start at the top, at the Senate, at the House, but start in
yes,
your local community. Get active in the school district. Be active in the Board of Education, your local areas that are
yes.
affecting children and their education. Um, and with respect to local elections,
Mhm.
if you have the desire, go out and run as well for
Mhm.
a local office on the school
Absolutely.
board or the state legislation, your
Mhm.
city as well, representative. So there's a lot we can do at a grassroots level to affect change in our local communities. And then after you do that, then move on up, right, to the
Mhm.
regional, to the state. And get involved there. But, we have elections coming up. There's opportunities for everyone to be involved, whether you have a lot of time or a little time. You can join phone banks. You
Yes,
can walk your communities. You
yes,
can have nice, conscious, respectful conversations across
yes,
the aisle
yes.
with people who may think differently than you.
Mhm.
And I think when you can have nice, courageous, respectful conversations with people that you may not see eye to eye on certain issues, you can share information.
Mhm.
And I think that's the beauty of our democracy in America. that's how we can maintain our democracy in America, by
Yes.
being respectful of each other, of
Yes.
of others' values and the choices they make. You don't have to agree with it, but
Hmm.
you can be respectful of it.
Hmm.
So I would say, let's all move forward, in the light, and do what you can. Do what you
Hmm.
can to make a difference in your
Hmm.
local area.
Hmm.
Um, and then if you have time to get involved in a national election, do so. Whatever time or way that you can contribute, it all makes a difference in maintaining the strength of our democracy. And I'll,
Yes, yes.
mhm,
And it is an all hands on deck situation. So
mhm,
find what you can do, where you can fit in,
mhm,
and nothing is too small.
yeah.
Sometimes people think it's not enough, me just going, sitting here, handing out some pamphlets or having the conversations that you're talking about.
Mhm,
And you never know
mhm,
who you're speaking to that might be on the cusp of something or not really understanding something
mhm,
or not even just knowing, how their vote really makes a difference.
mhm, mhm,
Having those conversations, passing out mailing out the postcards and making the phone call, all of those things add up as a
right,
collective.
right.
All of those things add up as a
Mhm,
collective for us to move humanity forward. I do want to leave folks with some positives too,
yep.
some things to look forward to. So I was watching this morning. I'm trying to be brief because we're almost out of time. Um, but Congresswoman Crockett from Dallas, Texas, she was on in this segment, and she was talking about the fact that they're working on a bill which is called the Court Reform Task Force. So,
Okay.
I'm sorry. She said, she had her thing this week. She said, but what got missed in the media was that this task force is now together. And so their objectives are to expand the Supreme Court, which would give us more of a balance and that bipartisanship that you talked about. And the
Mhm,
reason why Roe was snatched away from us is because we have this very conservative leaning court right now. So there are things that are being put in place to help promote change, but it's going to take all of us and to see how it's all connected, right? So, number one, expand the court. Number two, impose ethic regulations.
mhm,
And then also to cap the terms because the Supreme Court is a lifetime at this point in time. So
yeah.
they're looking at around like 18 years
For a
is what
term
they're
limit.
working on.
Mhm,
But for those things to happen,
mhm,
we would have to take back the house, right?
mhm.
So just even having those conversations to show people how all these things are connected
Right.
is a great starting point as well. And then also I know a lot of people are concerned about Gen Z and young people, but I also found this other group. They're called Tour to Save Democracy. And what they are doing this summer with their summer off from college, high school, etc.,
Mhm,
they are traveling across the country to flip seats and to pass bills and really pushing to get more of Gen Z to really focus on. And their focus is on gun safety, feeling safe
mhm.
in their schools and on their
Yeah.
campuses.
Yeah.
Um, Also, in regards to when you graduate in college, the opportunities to purchase a home and
Yeah.
be earn an income, get that great job. That's where
Mhm,
their focus is. So they're like, we
mhm,
want to make sure that we're out there supporting candidates that are supporting what we are looking forward to in our lives, right? And our protections on campuses. So where you've got a certain portion of Gen Z that is really focused on the Middle East and Gaza, and we're not taking away from that. We support them as well. We have this other group of young people that are focused on gun safety in this country
mhm,
and
mhm.
making sure that college graduates have the same opportunities that their parents and their grandparents have,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And that speaks to those grassroots organizations that you were talking to as
Mhm,
well. Gen
mhm.
Z is picking up the mantle on that also.
Yes.
So those are a couple of positives that I saw this week. But any final words for the audience before we wrap up?
I know, we started off talking about the women empowerment and women in the workforce, but we ended up talking about all of the Gen Zers and really what they're looking to is what's important to them. And I think that's important
Mhm.
for us to also keep in mind.
Yeah.
What's important to them? Again, those are our children, and we tend to maybe overlook. The reasons why they're doing what they're doing right now, on college
Mhm.
campuses or out in the street. But it's good to always lean in to talk to them and see what's important, what's on their mind. So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
would just like to remind all the ladies in the house, all the ladies in the audience, although we traditionally have considered men the head of the household, ladies, remember that you are the neck.
Love that.
That's all I got to say. That's all I got to say. We'll end on that note. Thank you all for joining us for
Yes.
another episode of SV and Roxy. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and definitely share the podcast here on YouTube. And then follow us on all social media platforms, which you will find on at the end of this video. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you. Bye.
Bye.